Hearing this proposal, Kazuro headed there in the company of his two monsters. The desire to see his classmates who thought he was weak and prove them wrong overwhelmed him. The school beauty and her friends heard that time was short, and Nada was going to the safe zone. They were just nearby and came first. Seeing what the room looked like for those who had absorbed the power of one monster, they were upset, because it was dirty and cold. While the trio was looking at the room and complaining about the lack of comfort, their classmates approached the entrance. The girl was upset by her cowardice because she had not absorbed a single monster. The guy tried to calm her down and tell her not to worry. Kazuro approached them from behind, confident and pleased with his victories. Entering the room, he met a bunch of people who kept pestering and teasing him. However, Kazuro didn't care about them anymore because he knew what was cooler. Kazuro passed by. He listened to their banter and complaints that they did not want to be in the same room with him. Kazuro reassured them, saying that he was not like them, and that's why he was going to the apartment for one. Chamber for VIP clients. The guys were surprised by this decision and didn't believe it. They thought that Kazuro was deceiving them and the system wouldn't let him in, but the thought of doubt was visible that he could still do it. Approaching the protective barrier of the VIP chamber, Kazuro extended his hand to open it and enjoys the reward of a worthy client. The guy's reaction didn't take long. When the barrier was opened, everyone was incredibly surprised by this decision. Everyone thought that he was cheating and was unfairly getting into the VIP chamber. Anger consumed them, and there was no end to their emotions. Kazuro's grin only added gasoline to the fire. Entering the room, Kazuro saw a plate of hot food and a pleasant atmosphere. The room was warm and the pleasant smell was driving me crazy. The camping stove, in which a delicious dish of fish and vegetables was cooked, showed by its appearance that it was delicious, and the smell conveyed all the contrast of the components. Having tasted the tender fish dish, he closed his eyes in admiration and tried to fully appreciate the taste. Having appreciated this delicious dish, he approached the barrier, behind which stood the main beauty of the school with her henchmen to tease them. But they couldn't go in and try. The anger took them more and more, but watching how Kazuro ate the fish with great appetite and enjoyed the comfort was disgusting. The arrogance of the main beauty of the school did not allow her to spend the night in a room without amenities and comfort. She wanted to get into the VIP room and was ready to negotiate. Sitting in his cozy room, Kazuro ate delicious dishes, but the trio disturbed him with a desire to buy his right or exchange with him for a fee. Kazuro, looking at their angry and arrogant faces, refused to teach them a lesson. No matter what amount they offered, he would still stand his ground. His classmates stood their ground and offered him a lot of money to give up his place. Unexpectedly, the girl reminded him that she was from a rich and influential family, and he would not be in trouble for such behavior. Putting his chopsticks aside, Kazuro looked at them and thought that he had not taught them a lesson enough if they continued to behave like this, and the threats were unnecessary. Approaching them closer, Kazuro offered to fulfill his wish if they so wanted to get into his apartment. Our influential beauty received an offer. If she slaps her partner with glasses, he will think about the offer to switch with them. She immediately agreed, which made the bespectacled man surprised by this decision. A classmate immediately calmed the guy down, saying that she would compensate for the blow, reminding him that her family was influential and would help him. Preparing for the blow, the girl swung with all her might and hit him in the face, almost knocking off his glasses. The bespectacled man was even thrown back from such a blow, he was confused. "Well, I'm happy," the girl said. "Now will you give us the place?" Kazuro changed his mind, and saying that it was great, but not impressive, turned around and joyfully, after such and such a show, decided to go to the table and continue the meal. Realizing that Kazuro would not give them his place, they turned around upset and left. Glad that the group had finally left behind, I continued to enjoy the hot food. Against the background of their screams, another welding of classmates flared up. Unfortunately, not everyone was able to absorb the monster's power. Those who were unable to absorb the monster before midnight were prohibited from entering the safe zone. The girl was very afraid to be alone and asked her classmate to be with her. Kazuro knew this couple because the guy was in love with her. He often ran after her at school and helped her in everything. I have never seen a classmate answer him. She was afraid to be alone, asked the guy to take places with her and give up his place because he loved her. Knowing that her classmate is not indifferent to her, she uses an insidious technique in the form of a kiss to achieve her goal. She was sure that the guy would give in and give her the place. Looking at this, Kazuro understood that she had taken advantage of him, and he felt sorry for the guy. But he could not do anything. After the first kiss from the girl he loved, he immediately agreed to everything and gave up his place. Now, the girl was safe, and he remained near the entrance to wait until dawn. Kazuro was very tired from all these scandals and quarrels and lay down in a warm bed. He fell asleep quickly, and his snoring was so loud that it did not let anyone sleep. Because of the terrible snoring, no one could sleep. Everyone was tired, and looking at these beds, they did not think that they could sleep here, and the snoring drives them crazy. The thought of what a bastard this Kazuro is doesn't leave them alone. Being in this blood-spattered room, we looked for a cleaner place to rest. The influential classmate was already dreaming that morning would come and teach the nasty Kazuro a lesson, to prove that she was the strongest and most gifted here. Looking at the blood-stained bed, he doesn't understand how anyone can sleep here. The bespectacled boy, in order to please his beautiful classmate, offers to lay his shirt down so that it doesn't get dirty. But alas, it will not be possible to remove the smell of blood. Putting a shirt on the bed didn't make it any cleaner, but it did provide at least some place to lie down and rest. The idea was good. The desire to please my classmate was great. While everyone was trying to sleep and rest, our loving boy, who had sacrificed his place for his beloved, was sitting near the safe zone looking at his watch. Suddenly, he heard a noise coming from the dark corridor, some ominous growling and grinding. Goosebumps of fear immediately ran through my body. Approaching closer in front of the guy, an entity appeared, 2 meters tall and with blood-red eyes. The classmate immediately took a defensive stance and prepared for battle. The appearance of this monster was like maniacs from horror films. The mask was tied with ropes, through which one could see. The bloody face of the monster made everyone fall into horror. The boy was pretty scared when he saw such a formidable opponent standing in front of him. A trembling ran through his body, cold sweat appeared on his face. His eyes twitched with fear. Trying not to faint, the boy gathered the strength to call his absorbed monster to help. The devoured monster was an axe-wielding warrior, a strong opponent. He saw the face of the frightened boy and did not yet know what he would have to fight. Unexpectedly, a warrior with an axe is attacked by a huge maniac with a chainsaw. He looked so intimidating that the warrior with an axe was not sure that he could survive a fight with such an opponent. Having managed to place a block, he saved himself from a crushing blow from a chainsaw. Sparks flew in all directions, and the force of the impact was incredible. Hearing what was happening behind the barrier, everyone woke up and jumped out of their beds. Even Kazuro came out to see what was happening. Everyone was scared, except him. The guys started shouting to a classmate that her boyfriend was attacked by a monster with a chainsaw and he was fighting there, to which the girl, trembling, did not say a word. Jumping headlong under the blanket, she was cowardly with fear and was afraid only for herself, showing that she was indifferent to him. Everyone was shocked by this attitude. Her boyfriend is fighting a monster, but she doesn't care. Each of her classmates looked at her with contempt for her indifference to him. Kazuro, confident in himself, decided to come closer and assess how much selenium the monster is, and whether it is worthy of being devoured. A monster with a chainsaw attacked the warrior with an axe, knocked him to the ground and began to trample him. Everything was so fast that the guys barely had time to see everything. The blows were very strong and it was clear that the warrior with the axe was losing in this duel. His chances were getting less and less. Being pinned to the ground, a monster with a chainsaw tears off the warrior's arm. The monster's foot stood on the head and squeezed it. From the pain of tearing off his hand, the monster barely remained conscious. It was a cannibal. He greedily ate the warrior's hand, trying to get enough. Such a monster was very difficult to defeat. His mask tied to his face hid who he really was, and his torn clothes spoke of his long stay here. Having appreciated the taste of the axe warrior's flesh, he was not satisfied and threw it away. Apparently, the taste of the same monster was unpleasant for a cannibal with a chainsaw. Being angry and hungry, he continued to attack the warrior in order to kill him. The anger caused by hunger was very strong and frightening. Taking his saw in his hands, he began to loudly gas it, causing the sharp chain to unwind. After another blow, the warrior's head was cut off. Fear and bitterness were visible in his eyes. The fight was not equal, but there was nowhere to run. This was his last fight. The head lying at the feet of the absorber said that now he was next. The warrior he so hoped for turned out to be too weak in front of this mountain with a chainsaw. Kazuro was amazed by the monster's strength and understood that such a monster would be very useful in his collection. Such strength and power. What? Nada. His satisfied and interested face was thinking about what he lacked for battles, and an attacking monster would be very useful. The monsters that Kazuro absorbed only had a stun effect, and there was no warrior among them. Having collected such a trinity, he will be able to withstand any opponent without any problems. While Kazuro was thinking, the cannibal cornered his classmate to taste his flesh. The roar of the chainsaw drove me crazy and made me even more afraid. In fear, he began to scream for help. The horror he felt was indescribable. Thoughts that this was his end appeared in his head. Classmates, seeing this, being afraid to do something themselves, began shouting to his girlfriend that he would die now if nothing was done. She didn't care about the guy. She was afraid herself and did nothing. She just trembled under the blanket and said that she was scared and wouldn't get out. Kazuro was disgusted to see such a reaction. He saw betrayal on her part. It was disgusting to realize that such love. While everyone stood behind the barrier and cowered in fear, instead of distracting the enemy, the boy in tears begged them to save him, at least Kazuro. His eyes began to shed tears of despair. Swinging his chainsaw, the monster tried to cut the guy so that he could taste the fresh, young flesh. But although the guy was scared, he didn't give up so easily. Having dodged the blow, he wanted to get to the barrier by sneaking under the huge monster. The saw chain, stained with blood, only splashed blood everywhere and frightened him with its roar. Unfortunately for the guy, the cannibal had a good reaction and did not miss the moment, hitting the guy in the stomach from his knee, realizing that he had missed the saw. The boy began to fly to the side, feeling severe pain from broken ribs. The blow was so strong that it broke a couple of ribs and blood gushed from the mouth. He had never experienced such pain. The chances of salvation disappeared with every second of confrontation with such a powerful monster with a chainsaw. Flying away from the blow, he slammed into the wall, almost losing consciousness. The number of fractures and the pain that followed them was great. The splash from the blow and strong cries of pain could be heard throughout the entire corridor. The condition was deplorable. The monster slowly approached with a screaming chainsaw to finish off the boy. The monster looked at him like he was a piece of meat and did not feel any pity. The sharp chain wanted to greedily dig into the guy's flesh and shred it. Being stunned and barely conscious, he suddenly feels pain in his shoulder. Seeing how the chain has dug into his body, tearing his flesh, he screams in pain. The sawn-off hand that the monster was holding was dripping with blood. The guy lost consciousness as a result of the incident. Greedily and with a crunch of bones, the monster ate the guy's hand, saying that he had not eaten human flesh for a long time. Horror ran through my body looking at this. While the monster was eating his hand, the boy began to come to his senses. Having come to his senses, he saw the monster eating his hand and remembered that the examiner gave them scrolls for salvation. He begins to slowly put his hand into his pocket so that the monster does not notice and takes out a scroll from there. Taking the scroll out of the inner pocket of his jacket, he wanted to quickly use it and save himself, realizing that he had failed the exam. The scroll glowed and was quite bright. The monster could notice such a glow. After finishing his hand, the monster notices bright glares of light behind him and turns to the guy's side. Wanting still young human flesh and waving a chainsaw, he attacks him so that he does not run away. The monster's obsession was immeasurable. The boy, with the last of his strength, manages to jump to the side in order to survive. From such a blow, fragments flew. The thirst for profit, the desire to kill, such a monster could not be stopped. Kazuro shouts to his classmate to quickly tear the scroll, otherwise he will die. Kazuro behaved quite calmly when they tried to kill a classmate in front of his eyes and did not interfere. To which the boy gathers his thoughts and agrees with this. Fear prevents him from thinking normally, but Kazuro's words reminded him of what to do. He kneels down and tears the scroll with his teeth, while the monster swings his chainsaw in anticipation of the final victorious blow. Tearing the scroll with your teeth releases a huge power of teleportation back to the classroom. She acts quite quickly and can save anyone in a difficult situation. The boy was saved. The chainsaw blow did not catch the magic of the scroll, and the monster remained a beggar. A sharp saw chain flew through the boy's already disappeared head. The monster was very confused and did not understand what had happened. He screamed out of anger, not understanding where his prey had gone. He wanted more meat and thirsted for blood. The body expressed tension and readiness for aggressive actions. Kazuro was waiting for the right moment to fight the monster, because his power made it possible to absorb the monster when he was as enraged as possible. Plus, he had to come up with a plan on how to defeat such a thug. Looking at the boy, the monster begins to shred the barrier, but it does not give in. Anger overwhelms him, but this is not enough for Kazuro. The big and angry monster has been trying to cut through the protective barrier for a long time and does not want to give up. Kazuro pretends that the monster is not trying hard, yawning and showing complete calm, that the monster's strength does not impress anyone and does not cause fear. The monster is even more irritated by this situation. Kazuro comes up with the idea of going up to the barrier and teasing the cannibal with his delicious hand, thereby angering the monster more. The boy provokes the monster by saying that his hand is so tasty and full of protein and the taste is just lickable, to which the monster, drooling, looks at the hand, emitting a pleasant young smell of flesh. Hunger controls him and gives him no rest. The monster cannot break through the barrier and begins to understand this. His face can't tear himself away from the sight of the nice, fresh meat that he loves so much. Kazuro teases the monster more and more, to which he boils. He abruptly removes his hand and begins to make faces, sticking out his tongue and fooling around with all his might. This brazen behavior of the guy began to make the monster very angry. I use a hail of my strongest blows on the barrier, exuding anger and loud screams with the chainsaw chain hitting the barrier in the hope of getting to this wretch and devouring him. After such an attempt, the monster decides to retreat, realizing that he was wasting his energy in vain because he failed to break through the barrier. Kazuro notices that the monster can leave. Kazuro is not happy with this situation, and he activates the barrier to get out. The monster must not be released, otherwise it could harm someone else. Having collected himself, Kazuro comes out, thereby showing the monster that he is not in the protection zone and can be attacked. The monster pays attention to the boy and with great desire wants to kill and devour him. Turning around, the monster rushed to run towards Kazuro, its desire for hunger and anger taking over and controlling it. The drool, like that of a dog, developed at high speed. Kazuro decided to have fun. Realizing that he should not show his strength to his classmates, he began to gain time by mocking the monster. The monster can't keep up with the guy and hits the barrier. The children are amazed at Kazuro's stupid and reckless behavior, but they don't interfere. Once again, the monster leaves as a beggar, screaming in irritation. This was not enough for Kazuro, and he goes out again to provoke the monster. He again sees the guy come out and teases him. Kazuro will not back down and will bully the monster until he wins so that he gives up. This time he runs even faster, screaming and the crazy roar of the chainsaw, trying to have time to cut off this damned head of the impudent boy. But again he doesn't have time. Kazuro stands in front of the barrier and laughs right in the face of a huge monster. Classmates are at a loss as to how brave or stupid he is, so they tease the monster. Tsuyuki, watching such risky actions by Kazuro, was a little worried and did not understand why she would do this to a monster. A classmate in a blue jacket and blonde hair was very surprised when he saw that the monster began to run away. The bespectacled boy, hearing the words of his comrade, also began to look and was stunned by the fact that Kazuro ran after him. The guys were so surprised that they did not understand what was happening and how Kazuro could so fearlessly pursue such a huge and evil monster that only recently he almost killed their classmate. Chasing the monster along the corridor, Kazuro tried with all sorts of screams to stop him and fight to absorb such a big guy. But the monster was already very exhausted by Kazuro's pathetic jokes and actions, and therefore ran away. Having caught up, he began to provoke the monster with his hand, saying how tasty and juicy it was. The monster was very surprised by such actions that the boy chases after him and offers to devour him. This has never happened to him before. Looking at the guy's hand, hunger again spoke in the monster's head, and he tried to attack the guy. A tasty and juicy hand loomed in front of the face and only beckoned with its appearance alone. Launching his chainsaw, he swung without a shadow of a doubt to kill this slippery provocateur and devour him. The strong swing of a large chainsaw with sharp teeth on a chain was already aimed at the boy's head. Having time to react, Kazuro uses the magic of the red eye to stop the monster. Such a spell is enough for such a thug, but not for long. The ability was useful and allowed you to control and not allow yourself to be attacked. "It worked!" Kazuro exclaimed, and looking at the frozen body of the monster, he began to insult that he was weak and could not do anything. Kajuro's arrogant feeling gave him the opportunity to take a closer look at the monster and not be afraid for himself, being motionless. The monster choked with saliva while looking at the delicious boy. He wanted to quickly kill and devour this scoundrel. Kazuro's provocations did not stop. He kept showing his delicious hands and saying how delicious he was. Freed from the stupor spell, the monster immediately attacked the guy, but he dodged as if nothing had happened. The strong impact of the saw began to cut through the floor of the hospital, and a large number of sparks began to fly in all directions. The monster was already on the aisle, so if it would be enough to absorb it a little more and its defense would fall, it would become an easy prey for Kazuro. His body seemed to be burning with great anger towards the boy, and wanted to kill and tear the insolent man into pieces. A look that exuded the maximum level of hatred and anger made his whole body tense. This was the limit of his emotional protection. Now Kazuro could attack him. Kazuro, with a slight smirk on his face, casts an absorption spell. Now he will have a great attacking warrior in his arsenal. It begins to absorb the monster and all its abilities. In bewilderment, the monster screams, not understanding how he was defeated, and in every possible way shows his dissatisfaction that this should not have happened. Finally, the boy had an attacking monster, which was displayed as a chainsaw on his hand. "The collection has been replenished," Kazuro said. He looked at his left hand and enjoyed the new sign of the monster that would serve him. The examiner watched everything that happened. He was sure that this was the new Lord of the Monsters. Although the guy's actions were questionable, there was almost no doubt. Through the windows of the hospital, he saw each and every action of the test participants. The examiner saw great potential in the boy, and the way he dealt with such a formidable opponent while playing raised many questions. His thoughtful look began to suspect that the boy really had abilities that would help him achieve high results in life. The speakers in the safe zone said that there were 7 hours left before dawn, and the guys were getting ready to continue the exam. The speaker worked on the examiner's magical abilities and did not require electricity, which the hospital did not have anyway. The children panicked, because the monster that Kazuro ran after could be nearby and waiting for them. They were sure that Kazuro had already gone to class after tearing up the teleportation scroll, because he could not defeat such a monster. Kazuro enters the room with his hands in his pockets, showing complete calm and confidence. They looked at him with many questions, but they did not think that the boy was capable of absorbing such a big guy with weak indicators. Kazuro said that the monster with the chainsaw is no longer there, and they have nothing to fear. If they want to complete the exam, they should look for other monsters. Classmates with surprised and angry faces did not believe that such a bastard could win. They began to assume that the monster simply ran away somewhere, and Kazuro did not find him, and they think that he wants to set them up again. Despite the insults of his classmates, Kazuro began to think about how the absorbed abilities of monsters could help him become one of the leaders of the Devourers. Remembering that the Absorbers have their own hierarchy of strength and class, he already imagined how he flaunts himself at the top of the food chain and controls everyone. After much thought, he was tired since he had slept very little. and running after the monster had exhausted him greatly. I didn't think for long. I plopped down on the bed with a comfortable mattress and tried to sleep. The warm room warmed us, and the smell of food gave us comfort. As dawn came, the sun began to filter through the dusty windows. The street was calm and quiet. Huge houses could be seen through the windows nearby, and the place did not look so abandoned. Leaving the VIP room, Kazuro had breakfast with warm toast cooked on a magic tile that she cooks herself. The mood was good and he looked pretty good. Seeing his classmates leaving the safe zone, he noticed that they looked tired and hungry. Tsuyuki held her stomach and also wanted hot food and warm tea, but to get involved with Kazuro, who set them up. Kazuro decided to offer them his toast as a sign of reconciliation and act more amicably. If they don't eat, they will have little chance of fighting monsters without powers. This only infuriated the principled beauty Tsuyuki and the bespectacled man, but their friend was interested, although he understood that it was low to agree to such a thing, to be friends with trash. Kazuro began to smile at their reaction and continued to finish his toast. From the guys' conversations, the traitor to her boyfriend finally woke up, and everyone looked at her with contempt. She yawned loudly and drew attention to herself. Kazuro stood near her bed and, hearing the sounds, turned his head and stopped chewing. Seeing that everyone was looking at her like that, she felt guilty, but she was not going to show it. The condemning glances seemed to cut her from the inside. Kazuro and the others looked at her, showing complete disgust for her action. Kazuro said that she took advantage of the guy's feelings and he paid for it, and she, in turn, did not even help him. That guy didn't deserve this. Hearing Kazuro's words, the girl became pretty angry and began to make excuses that she did not have the absorbed monster and could not help him in any way. "You should have helped him," the girl exclaimed. Kazuro began to shout at her that she had abandoned him to the mercy of fate and they had to help him. The monster that attacked him was very weak and they did not know how to save him, and they were not obliged to. He survived, but failed the exam, outnumbered by his competitors, Kazuro said. The girl's gaze was filled with fear and disappointment in herself. She was overwhelmed with emotions and anger towards others who blamed her and did not stand up for themselves. The examiner was watching them all this time, since he has no right to interfere. Now he had to inform the guys about the last test for them and finish the exam. A voice from the speakers intervened in the welding of classmates, announcing that the upcoming test was to capture or destroy a dangerous monster. "They have until noon." The trio of our hero's main haters began to discuss a plan to catch the monster. They had to gather their strength and pass the test. Tsuyuki decides to take action and asks his comrades to keep up and keep their eyes open. Not everyone agreed with the words of the main beauty, since the monster that had to be caught or killed was of the highest level, and the monsters they absorbed were of an average level, and there was little chance of such an undertaking. Tsuyuki began to reassure her friend by saying that there were 3 of them, and they could cope with such a monster. Hearing that everyone was making plans to catch the monster and not offering her their help, she was terribly scared, realizing that she would be alone. Suddenly, a monster with a large tongue and glowing eyes appears on the ceiling behind her. The girl does not feel threatened because she is very worried that no one wants to help her. Noticing the monster, Kazuro tensed up greatly, as it came out of nowhere and took them by surprise. Fear temporarily consumed him. The others didn't even show that they noticed anything. The monster looked like a cross between a man and a spider, huge claws and 6 glowing eyes. Such a creepy creature could climb walls and ceilings silently, and the spikes on its hands looked very sharp. Kazuro was even more surprised that only he could see this monster. The others did not even notice such a huge thing on the ceiling. They were calm, which means they definitely didn't notice anything, remembering that one of the skills of the red eye is to see other monsters and their aura. Thanks to him, he was able to notice this. Kazuro realized that only he had a chance to defeat such a dangerous high-level monster. Kazuro began to tell them not to relax, because the monster might be somewhere nearby and attack them. Meanwhile, the monster began to descend and crawl closer to the girl standing near her bed. Pointing his finger at his classmate, he says that there is a monster over her, and everyone needs to leave here urgently. His face did not show fear, and the guys again suspected that the boy was joking. The others didn't believe him because they didn't see the monster. Again, they decided that Kazuro was mocking them in order to provoke them. Tsuyuki said that such jokes are too dangerous and cruel to the others, and Kazuro, we need to stop making fun of them like that. The girl standing in the corner, realizing that everyone still blames her for what happened, is very unhappy that they are making fun of her so much, since she is very afraid of monsters. She begins to feel that no one needs her anymore. Suddenly, a hand breaks through her thin waist, making a deep hole in her stomach. This wound was very large and fatal, damaging internal organs and causing shock. Everyone, seeing this, became a little worried and realized that Kazuro was not joking. The girl stood opposite them with fear and shock in her eyes, and the hole in her stomach was bleeding heavily. Tsuyuki was very frightened and ran into her friend with blonde hair, who stood behind and was also shocked by what he saw. Lowering her eyes, she noticed a terrible wound on herself. The shock did not let her understand what had happened. There was no one nearby, and here it was. Fear permeated her entire body, and there was no saving her. The girl began to ask in fear for help, not understanding what had happened. Grabbing the girl's almost lifeless body, the monster wrapped its tongue around her and grabbed her by the face with sharp claws. He greedily devoured her with his gaze and did not feel any pity for the girl. The monster was large and had 6 eyes, which helped him see everything clearly. He tears her into 3 parts mercilessly and cold-bloodedly. All that the others see is how the standing girl simply flew into pieces, but Kazuro sees the monster and understands everything. The lifeless remains greatly frighten others.